If you're a small business owner, you'll know just what it's like to be the chief everything officer. HR, payroll, employee benefits. Well, Gusto can do all of that for you. Gusto is online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses. It's all in one, remote friendly, and incredibly easy to use. It's quick and simple to switch to Gusto. Just transfer your existing data to get up and running fast. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/lockedonsoccer and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's gusto.com/lockedonsoccer.
Forward. Really bugs us. Need it record earlier. Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to another How Are the podcast. And I'm not sure how much it matters if you haven't listened to part one of our bumper Q&A, but today is part two, and we'll hope to get through everyone's questions that has been sent in to us, because we've had loads of fantastic questions. But as I said, it's debatable whether you'll need the info from part one, as I'm sure we'll go off on enough tangents and down enough rabbit holes that we may even answer a question or two along the way. But of course, luckily, I have the same trusty steeds as I had in the first part. And first up to provide all of your in-depth answers, we have Johnny Hawley. Hello, Johnny.
Hello, Chris. I'm not sure I'm going to be living up to the in-depth answers part, but I can definitely talk. You know, you'll get a lot of answers. They just might not be particularly profound.
Or answers to the questions that are actually given. But
No, you'll notice I said I'll provide answers. I did not specify the answers to what. So,
yeah. Well, a peek behind the curtain. We're recording soon after the England versus Croatia game. But as you're listening to this, I think the second game might be quickly coming up. So how excited, Johnny, did that first England game get you?
it did the same thing to us. It does every time. I spend the weeks in the build-up to the major tournament. I'm not really that bothered about this one. Just don't seem to be as excited as I normally would be. And then England play. If we get a decent result, bang, it's coming home. We're going to win the lot. You know, Tuchel's getting a knighthood, and Harry Kane's going to be the World Cup top scorer of all time. And yeah, I've fallen straight back into the rabbit hole again, as I always do, and I'm bang up for it now. And I think, famous last words, but we've got such an exciting England team as well. You know, the Croatia game, the way that we went for it and we attacked and we were positive against probably the best team in the group. It's a really good sign, that. So as long as we keep that kind of mentality, I think it'll be, you know, whether we do succeed or whether we crash out in, you know, the quarters or whatever, I think we're at least going to be entertained along the way.
Well, that's it. I don't think we mind so much as long as we can say we had a go, which I think has been the problem in some past World Cups. But also joining us today, and it's apt because we've got a question on them, because we have the kit man himself, which is, of course, Andrew Smithson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, mate. You're talking there to Johnny about in-depth answers and all of this. I think I'm good at answering the question that was asked earlier on in the pod, because that's when my brain then comes up with a suitable answer. We've already moved on. So I'll not even give in-depth or answer the right questions this time, I'm afraid, boys.
So would that mean you'd be good at Jeopardy, or was that the other way around? I can't remember.
Oh, I don't know. Chris, you mentioned kits. Let's just get out of this as quickly as possible before I say anything else.
Well, I'll go into the obvious question then, Andrew. Is it coming home?
Yeah, go on. Why not? Listen, after a season of supporting Sunderland, anything's possible.
Wow. Sunderland fan in being optimistic, shocker. I mean, the headline for
I think he's right, though. You know, I think Sunderland actually being good at long last has sort of rotted all of our brains, because I'm sat here thinking, honestly, I think we're going to do it now. I'm like, yeah, I'm not scared of anyone. Mbappe, rubbish him. You know, you couldn't lace Brian Brobby's boots, never mind Harry Kane's. You know, so I think it's sent us all doolally.
Well, to be fair, Brian Brobby's boots are probably so big it would take anyone quite a while to lace them up.
You start now and you finish by the time the next World Cup rolls around. Aye.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I want to let the listeners in a little bit, because like I said, we wish we'd hit record earlier, because on part one, we did get into football manager strategies and all that. And you said your first one was Championship Manager 2007, Johnny. Your management game memories.
Yeah, that was PS2 Championship Manager 07 back in the day. Little Ben Johnny sat there, plotting all of his transfers and organising all of his tactics, which might shock you, weren't particularly detailed or in-depth tactics. There was a lot of, if we put 4 defenders and 4 midfielders and 2 strikers, and we might be good. And unlike the Sunderland teams that followed those seasons, we got promoted obviously in real life, and then we were all right. I think Championship Manager might be a bit easier than real life football, because I seem to have loads more success as a child than all these professional managers did in real life. So yeah, either I'm some sort of secret genius, or being a football manager might actually be a little bit trickier than it seems to be when you're playing it on a games console. I'm not sure which side of that I fall down on yet, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I actually stopped Andrew answering this before we started recording because I wanted to hear the answer on the pod. But where did your footy management career start?
Well, I know when it ended. I know when I retired and took a job upstairs in the boardroom was the time Johnny started playing. So that was...
Did that coincide with kids? Because I know that did with me. That finished me off with those games.
Yeah.
So you moving up in the boardroom, that's why I could never get a proper transfer budget, man. Said Andrew controlling the bloody purse strings.
He was no Gasolfi, like, was he?
Yeah. Well, that's it. I didn't want somebody coming up and showing us up by doing a better job. So I was,
he was the Harry Redknapp style director of football rather than Gasolfi.
I was playing on my Amiga back in the day when on Championship Manager I had a squad which had like Gary Hours and Lee Howie and Kevin Ball. So what are we talking then?
Well, the first one,
90s?
The first one was 92, 93, I think it was. Because I had that one.
It might have been one of the ones that followed if Lee Howie was on it. But I was your classic, mum and dad talking, worried about Andrew because he spent all day sat at that computer, Is there problems at school? Are you being bullied, son? No, genuinely, this is what I want to do with my spare time. And I had a one as well that you had to pick a conference side.
Premier Manager.
Was that the one where you had a phone and you could
that was Premier Manager.
I liked that one as well. You used to get to pick who would be on the sponsor boards around the pitch and all sorts, man.
Yeah, there was Ultimate Soccer Manager as well, where you could pay people bungs as well, referees bungs, and you could build your stadium and put hot dog stands and burger stands outside your stadium and all that.
Did they not have a manager put their name to that one? Funnily enough,
surprisingly not even Barry Fry stuck his name on that one. But anyway, let's get into the questions. And first up, and actually it leads from part one in some ways, Johnny, because Colin Benson has sent one in. We finished last time on European football. Colin Benson is asking, considering we're in European football next season, should Sunderland sacrifice the domestic cup competitions to focus on the Premier League and the Europa League? He says, we will have extra games which will stretch the squad. We're already the bookies' favourites to finish 17th. And he says, personally, I'd play a mix of fringe and academy players for the game time and exposure to men's football in the case of academy players. Plus, he adds, he would massively reduce the ticket prices for any home tie in domestic cups due to the extra costs of European matches. But yeah, interesting points there.
I certainly agree with the ticket pricing. I think that would be a bit of an easy win for the club. And obviously, being in Europe does mean that there's more commitments for supporters through the season. We know we're going to get at least 4 extra home games, because the league phase is 8 games. And then, depending on where you finish, if you're in the top 8, you go straight through. If you're in that middle 16, you've got to play an extra 2-legged, essentially like a playoff round. So at least 4 home games, possibly 5, and that's just to get into the knockout phase proper. And obviously you would hope that as a Premier League side, and it's not very romantic, but with a hell of a lot more money than most teams in the competition, that we'd be, if not one of the favourites to get to the semis or the final, at least among the favourites to reach, say, the quarters as a minimum. So there's likely to be a good handful of games, and that's just home games. Never mind the people who are going to be travelling. I mean, we discussed that a little bit on the last part. So yeah, I think something that would be sensible would be to reduce those, at least the early rounds of the cup, reduce the ticket prices, because it'll get more people in, and the more people that are in, the better the atmosphere is, and that usually helps us. So that part, absolutely. As to the sort of the main thrust of the question is, do we deprioritize stuff, and should we start thinking about? Now, look, there will be an element of that goes on through the season. It's unavoidable. Every manager in every club, in every competition in the world has to, at some stage, start thinking about managing his squad, making sure people are getting enough minutes or not too many, and what have you. But have we not learned yet that we should just trust them to go for stuff? Like, oh, is it going to be too early to get promotion because we're never going to be ready for the Premier League in time? Or we'll sign Granit Xhaka and 13 other players and survive so comfortably that we qualify for Europe. End of the season, do we even want to qualify for Europe? Is it not better for us if we just finish mid-table and then, go again next year? What are you talking about? Like, surely we all want to see Sunderland do as well as possible at all times. Now, again, I do totally accept that there probably are, certainly like League Cup games early doors. I don't imagine we're going to see Granit Xhaka and, Nordy Mukiele and everybody playing those type of games. So that's a factor, but that would be true anyway, really. Look at the first round of the League Cup last season. Mark Hughes started up front. Like, that's no slight on him, but he certainly wasn't first choice by any stretch at that time, was he? So even when we had just the league to think about, we were already doing this. I don't think you can get in the position. Like, we can't be greedy enough to start going, we can pick and choose. We're good enough to pick and choose what we want to try in and what. No. Go for everything. Play the strongest team you can within reason and see where it takes you. And back the club to recruit well enough to give us a squad that's strong enough to go through all the competitions we need to.
Well, you were saying that about Mark Guihu, but a few weeks later, he was Chelsea's first choice striker. So then that we were playing in up front for us.
And that game went really well for Chelsea, didn't it? They got a great result, didn't it, as I recall?
Yep, absolutely. But Andrew, just before we move off the topic, what's your feelings on that? Because you were nodding along. But the thing I want to throw into there is maybe the hunger of some of these players, because I think looking at Lebris in reaction to our FA Cup games when against Oxford and Everton mainly, because we won those, but he did seem like they had a hunger for it. Although that kind of falls down when you look at the overall performance of Port Vale. But it does feel like they had a hunger to be successful, whatever the competition.
Yeah, that's one of the things that strikes you about this squad most, that the players are really tuned in and want to give their best every single time. I don't think we'll ever formally duff a competition this season. The lads are not going to come into training in the days beforehand and Lebris is just going to say, "Oh, not bothered if you sack this one off, boys. We're just not going to bother." I think, though, we'll just be a bit pragmatic in that if we do lose or get knocked out of a competition, we'll just deal with it and not start gnashing teeth and wailing and pointing fingers and if we do lose early in a cup competition. Because I will admit I've been unhappy with our cup form over the last couple of years. I don't think it's been good enough. This time around, though, I hope I'm a little bit more understanding. I'm not going to be, making wild accusations about, the club don't care, the club have ripped us off because they've charged us to come and watch a game and then they've not shown up. if we have to lose a couple of games in the cup or in the league, we just need to be accepting of that and be comfortable with the knowledge that the players won't be happy about it, and they'll be doing their best to make sure that they're up for it when they really need to be.
Yeah. And let's just wait 12 months, because then we're going to be debating on these podcasts whether we should rest people for the Charity Shield or not. I can dream. Anyway, let's move on to a different topic, because we'll move away from Europe, and we're going into the summer, and not too much action yet, potentially because of the World Cup, but we're waiting for things to really take off in the market. But Johnny, Elliot asks about a long-term saga, Geertruida. He says, is no news actually good news on Geertruida? He says the club are great at keeping transfer business under wraps. So do you think we may announce it after the World Cup if terms are agreed? My feeling is, Johnny, that after that deadline went, I thought, if potentially the team selling could say, well, he's at the World Cup, he had a brilliant season in the Premier League, fee could go up 10, 15 million. So I just felt when that deadline gone, then I just felt it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was my initial gut reaction as well. Once the deadline passes and it means that we don't have a guaranteed option anymore, then on the one hand, it's not a great sign, because if everything's essentially already in place and all that needs to happen is the player needs to just give the green light again and say, yep, I'm still up for it, and then we can just do everything automatically. If that's not happened, there's a reason for that. We don't know the reason. It could be from the player side, it could be from the club side, it could be, it could be anything, couldn't it? But whatever it is, it's probably not ideal, otherwise we'd have signed him. And as you say, now that that option has expired, it's always possible that we could, we could be trying to drive the price down a bit, and for all he's gone to the World Cup, he's not necessarily going to actually be playing all that much. He's obviously he's the Trevor Chalobah of the Netherlands squad. He's not being called up because there's a defined place for him in that side. He's being called up because they needed a body. That's not to downplay, his achievement of going to a World Cup's incredible, but it's not necessarily going to have an inflationary effect on his transfer value, because he might not really get the chance to show himself. All that being said, as I say, I agree with you, Chris. I can't massively see it happening at this point. I feel like if it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. And look, I like Geertruida. I think he had a really strong end to the season. I think, he never disgraced himself at any point. And he looked committed, and he looked a good character to have around the place and all that. But I definitely didn't see anything in him that I don't think we could get from a good handful of other players on the continent, for example. I'm not saying it's just a piece of piss to go out and sign European level players, but it's not like Nordi Mukele, where you go, how the bloody hell did we sign him in the first place? Why was anybody letting him go? If somebody said go and replace Nordi, good luck. I don't think so. Whereas, with the greatest of respect, I think we can find another player who gives us what Geertruida gives us. Maybe not with the same level of versatility necessarily, or, there'll be caveats or compromises you have to make the same way there is replacing any player. But I'm certainly not sat here, worrying or panicking about the idea of trying to replace him, because I think the club have shown that, well, I mean, we signed him in the first place, right? So we can clearly identify the talent, and they've shown they're good negotiators. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. But I do think it's leaning the way of not signing him at this point.
Yeah, I definitely feel that as well. And going into the next question, it's and it's an interesting one to think about that Callum's asking here about the squad in general, because Andrew, he's asking, in regards to next season, which players are the first names on the team sheet when they're fully fit? He said for him, it's Roofs, Nordi, Granit, Xhaka, Siddiqui, and Enzo Lafay. He says everyone else can be changed or swapped out. Do you think that's fair to say that's the spine of our team next season? Maybe add Robbie to that list potentially, but do you think everything's built around that core?
It probably is. Pending sales, I think sadly Roots and Siddiqui are the two who were most fearful of losing. I agree with you, Chris, as well. I personally would include Broby in that spine around which everything works. Hume, maybe? Labris absolutely loves Hume. Maybe we upgrade in the summer, but every opportunity possible, Hume was in the team. So he might be one who plays regularly again. I know not everybody agrees, but yeah, you look at Ronaldo, for example. He perhaps might not play every game. Was Aldrete in that list, Chris? Sorry.
No,
Can't remember.
no. Roof, Snoddy, Granite, Siddiqui, and Enzo Lafayette.
I might say Aldrete as well, because unfortunately Ballard has got a history of injuries. But I tell you what a strong spine that is, and what a good bit of strength and depth we've got in the other names who may or may not start every time.
Yeah, but what I will say is to that, Callum in that question has put Enzo Lafayette in that kind of guaranteed first names on the team sheet. He started the season out of favour on the bench, so you just don't know how things are going to pan out from what the manager considers to be his first 11 on the start, the first day of the season, and then going into the season. But just before we get into signings, because I think that's where the questions are going from this point, I think we'll take a quick break. So we'll be back in a minute.
If your business runs on 5 different apps, 12 browser tabs, and one spreadsheet that everyone's afraid to touch, it's probably time for Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that connects every part of your business into one powerful, easy-to-use platform. So instead of wasting time switching between disconnected systems, your entire business works together in real time. Your team moves faster, your data stays accurate, and you can actually focus on growing your business. Let one unified system run your entire business. From the first opportunity to the final payment, everything works together in one place. Whether you're a small business or managing a large operation, Odoo gives you one flexible platform built to grow with you. Learn more at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
And welcome back to How We're the Podcast. And we've just been talking about the first names on the team sheet potentially on the first day of the season. But now we're going to potentially go into the topic of who we might sign and where we might sign them. But we've got a question from Andy Jonny. And he says that Regis Labris says that he wants 4 players. And Andy asks, if you could only sign 4 positions with no outgoings, where would you strengthen in this squad?
Right winger, centre forward, holding midfield, left back. Easy. I think it's the obvious 4. We know that we're going to need another striking option because it's looking very likely that one of Mayenda or Isidore are going to leave, and we could probably do with, and this is going to sound harsh, we could probably do with an upgrade in that area anyway. I don't think the options we've got there are necessarily on par with where we've ended up in the league, if that makes sense. Again, out wide, I think it's been obvious all season. That's an area of concern. Bertrand Traore had the right wing spot for a long period, and then he, goes to AFCON and also picks up injury and story of the season, right? But then we've had a sort of rotating cast of Chris Rigg and Trey Hume, and Talby's played on the right at points and what have you. So I think that's obvious. Holding midfield, because this is assuming no outgoings, or without assuming what the outgoings are. So obviously, he's mentioned Siddiqui might be potentially on the move. Obviously, if he goes, you need to replace him and whatever. But even if we keep everybody, I thought we needed a Granit Xhaka understudy in January. And, it's easier said than done, trying to bring somebody in who's of a good standard, but is going to accept that Granit Xhaka is the undisputed first choice. So that's a tricky one to nail down, but I think it's got to be right up there on the priority list. And then obviously left back, Dennis Serkin's gone, and the heartbreak of Arthur Masuaku leaving the club, which we might just about have recovered from by the time the season starts. That does mean that it's Reynaldo and nobody else. So, I think they basically pick themselves, don't they?
Yeah. Just really quickly on that, on your answer there, Johnny, because we got a similar question from Rob Ellison Davison, who asked a similar question saying what the essential positions are needed to strengthen, which you've answered. But he adds to that, do all signings in this window need to be first team ready? Because you put striker in there, and I'm actually interested to hear this because if Brian Brobby stays, because that question was assuming no outgoings, it's a difficult one then, because if Isidore and Mayenda stay, then you want to get someone good enough to challenge him, but at the same time, who's going to be good enough to challenge him and be happy to sit on the bench?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's always tricky, isn't it, when you're trying to recruit from a position of strength? We're all as Sunderland fans very used to going into transfer windows where we're trying to recruit from a position of extreme weakness, where you're essentially thinking, well, anyone we sign is probably going to do some sort of job better than the dross we've already got. But yeah, I think the right winger needs to be a first teamer. But I think with any of the other three positions, you can make okay, there's a difference between first team ready and first choice, isn't there? So I think, say that the Granit Xhaka understudy needs to be first team ready, because we need somebody who can step in and just do that job from day one when required. I think you can make a similar argument for the left back as well, where again Reynaldo is going to at least start the season as first choice. So we don't necessarily need somebody who can come in and immediately hit the ground running from day one. But I think just in general, I prefer defenders who are more ready. It's just a riskier position. Mistakes are more costly. The striker, though, is very interesting, because I think you can go two ways. You can either go the way of trying to bring in somebody who's essentially at or around Brobby's level, but is just a different type of player. So that you go the way of branching out into different options, rather than trying to recreate Brobby with another player, so you can just slot them in when he's either injured or suspended or, needs a rest or whatever. Or you go the other way and you bring in somebody who's very similar. And I think if you do that, you've almost got to go young, just by necessity of the fact that anybody who is a decent enough level that they could challenge him, if they're the same type of player, they're just going to look at it from the outside and go, right, so you're signing me to do the same job that you've already got a guy doing who you paid 20 million for and all your fans seem to love. It's obviously the levels are extremely different, but it's a little bit like Spurs trying to sign somebody to be a Harry Kane backup, where you just go, well, I'm not starting ahead of that guy, am I? So what am I doing here? So I would be happy with a striker being a young option who's maybe a little bit more raw and needs a bit more refinement, and isn't expected to come in and be firing from day one. Because I think, assuming we keep Brobby and say Isidore out of the three, I think you've got enough there to get by for the first months of the season while we bring somebody up to speed.
But there's incentive to because I'm trying to think, Mayenda would fit into the quota, wouldn't he? He'd be a homegrown player.
Unfortunately not, because when he went on loan, he went to Hibs. And because that technically then means his registration was with the Scottish FA and not the English FA for those 6 months, that interrupts his required 3 years. How ridiculous.
Bloody border. Should have made that wall bloody 10 feet tall.
We should have just loaned him to Blythe Spartans instead.
Yeah.
About the same standard of football, innit? No, actually, let's not go there.
We'll get Kelvin involved in that conversation. But Andrew, Johnny rattled off some positions. We did the pod on the predictions pod on where we might be pointing our, kind of transfer targets in terms of priorities. But Ben Cluj asks, he says, left back or right winger, which do we need to spend more on?
The issues I have with all of these questions, it's not a criticism, I'm not having a dig, but the longer we go down this road with Sunderland, I'm learning that things are just so flexible and there's so many grey areas. In the past, it would just be a case of, we need a striker, we'll go out for a striker, we'll pay this much, and until that striker's signed, we'll not look at anything else. I think our recruitment process is going to be very different. They're going to be working on different deals at the same time, and there'll be backups and what have you. I don't necessarily think anymore that the player Sunderland spend the most money on is necessarily going to be the finished product or the player the club are most excited about. If we forget the money and we would just look at importance to the team, perhaps, if I might do that, I would suggest right wing would be the one where there's a greater need. Yeah, we could do with a left back. We've got a couple of options to kind of muddle through with if Ronaldo's not available. Whereas right wing, I'm a little bit more concerned. Interested to think what other people say on that. I don't know if I'm alone in that thought or if that's the general consensus though, or what.
Yeah, well, I'm going to stick with you because you've just said how much you love these type of questions. And Joe Brown asks, if you were put in charge, who was the one signing you were making, Andrew?
Oh, God. I'd be picking up the phone to Regis Labris straight away and just saying, mate, I don't know how this has happened, but any chance you could nip that, please?
But it is interesting. It is interesting, though, just to go back off your last point, though, because honestly, because actually, I think there was a joke at the, I read it somewhere, I think at the Fixtures Breakfast about Mbappe that Gisolfi mentioned. I tell you what, if Mbappe was offered to Sunderland, I'm not sure I'd want him at Sunderland. I mean, good, don't get us wrong, he's absolutely like the most talented player in the world, potentially, but he wouldn't fit. And he doesn't fit into what we're trying to do and the kind of that group theory and what we're trying to do with the atmosphere around the place. So it's a strange one, isn't it? Because you could say, oh yeah, you go for the best player, but it's not about that, is it?
Exactly. It's really tricky. And Gasolfi, kind of following on from an answer he'd given previously, he tied it back in. He said, yeah, the first thing I would do is do some checks on his mentality and his personality to see if he fits in the group. That was genuinely one of the big themes of the fixtures, and how when they're looking at players, it's really important that they get to meet them in person and find out a bit about how they tick. They've got all the data on them as a footballer, but as a person and a member of a group, will they fit in? I do like the questions, Chris. There's no problems with the questions. I just think the club at the moment make it so hard to predict and try and second guess because they don't look at things in such black or white scenarios. That they are so multi-layered in how they do things. If I was in charge, God help us all, the I honestly don't know. I'm too much of a romantic. So I'd just go for something daft and just say, oh, we all loved Ahmad. Let's get him in, whether it's the right idea or not. So,
Well, he's a first-team quality right winger.
Well, exactly, aye. You know when I said earlier that sometimes I come up with the right answer, but it's like 20 minutes after the question? This might be one of those things where I actually come up with something sensible and you finish recording 2 hours previously.
See, sometimes I flinch a bit at the notion of Ahmad because I'm not sure he'd fit into the system and the way Labris wants to play. But then again, it's all opinions. But moving on to departures, Johnny, and Colin Benson asks about players moving on, and he says, how important is it for the club to move players on who are not wanted for next season before the first day of pre-season. Says you can currently fill a team bus with a host of players who've been out on loan or left in the wilderness, still contracted to the club. And he says the summer, most business will likely be done after the World Cup. So does it give little time for anyone to be moved out of the door?
I don't think the tournament really impacts it that much because, again, with the best will in the world, who are we trying to get rid of, right? Abdullah Bar, Ahmed Abdullahi, players like that who aren't at the World Cup. And I would suggest that the teams that would be interested in signing them aren't having their own preparations massively impacted by the World Cup. So I wouldn't think, for example, Alexic, that deal for him going out on loan was only confirmed the other day during the World Cup. So I don't think that the level of teams that we're going to be negotiating with or trying to be negotiating with to get these deals done are going to be too worried about that. I do think it's important to get rid of them because I think in almost in a selfish way, it helps us as a football club if we look after all of our players in the right way. And that means for players whose time has come to an end at Sunderland, it means getting them moves, getting them to get out and go and play football somewhere. Obviously, it helps us financially, but we're in a bit of a weird position where most European sides would be, their bloated squads would be full of players who were on good money and potentially long contracts and taking up valuable squad spaces. How much is Abdullah Bar's wage putting a dent in our finances as a Premier League club qualifying for Europe? I would suggest not massively. Now, obviously that every little helps and you don't want to be spending money that you don't need to be spending. But it's not like by getting rid of our fringe players, we're going to suddenly open up 50 grand a week's worth of wages on the wage bill to play with or anything like that. It's not even going to be enough savings to make a difference on one transfer, I would have thought. So it's not like we need the money, but yeah, I think it suits us to be known as a club that will look after players in every way. Similar to how we did with Jordan Willis when he got injured in League One, and we kept him round and gave him a contract extension and looked after him, and then he's in the crowd in the stadium on the final day because that treatment meant so much to him. Word of mouth, I think, counts for a hell of a lot in football because everybody knows everybody. And as much as it's modernised, it's still a bit of a kind of an old boys club, really, isn't it? Where it's who you know, not what you know. And if Sunderland are known by the people who matter as a good football club who look after players, then that just makes us more attractive to future signings yet again. It's like a similar principle to the same way that you don't want to stand in a Job or a Jack Clark or a Ross Stewart's way because it just reflects badly on you in the long run. Again, look at our neighbours down the road for a bit of a case study in how that can pan out. So yeah, I do think it's important that we move them on, but it's not desperation from us. I think it's more just it suits everybody. It's the right time for these players now. It's a bit of a clean break. Let's move on, bring in the squad that we need to kick on, and jettison the rest.
Yeah. Well, actually, just on the subject of the mags, Mad Mackham sent something in saying, please just discuss the mags. I was thinking you could make a segment called Mags Meltdown. It's just comedy gold at the moment. So, Mad Mackham, look out for our future edition of Mags Meltdown.
If you want some Mag Meltdowns, just go on Lee Ryder's Twitter and
they're doing it themselves, basically. So
exactly. Look at any of his tweets and any of the replies to his tweets, and you will be entertained for weeks.
Just quickly on the departures, stick with you, Johnny. Really quick answer on this because AP Mackham says, if we were to consider selling Luke O'Nien, what do you think his value would be?
He's untouchable. If he ever gets sold, I'm ripping my season ticket up. I'm resigning from the podcast and I'm going into a hermit life of reclusivity.
I'm potentially going to say when Luke O'Nien leaves, it's going to be for nothing because it'll be on his terms.
I agree. I don't think we should sell him. There's no amount of money that we could get as a fee for him realistically that would offset what we'd lose around the place by letting him go.
Well, Andrew, you were clapping there because Paul Rackstraw actually asks independently, he says, what do you consider a player that constitutes a club legend? He said, for me, it's someone who does more than just a football side. The only 4 I would consider to be legends are Monty, Bowley, Quinn, and '09. He says the first 3 are obvious, but I genuinely think '09's presence has driven the culture we have now.
That's a great question, and that could be a pod, it could be a thesis at uni, it could be a Jonathan Wilson book. And that's a great question. I think '09 as a player has done enough to be described as a legend. He's one of the players who's brought us back through the league, saved the club from some of its darkest days. Yes, by driving standards and having a great attitude and constantly wanting to improve himself. But purely as a player, I rate him. I think he's a really good player. He's a handful of games now off entering the top 20 of all-time Sunderland appearances. So, yeah, you don't get into that type of level without being just a genuine quality player who several managers respect and think can do a job. I'd maybe add a few more names into the list of legends, but certainly I do think '09 fully deserves to be one in himself, without doubt.
But
Well, yeah,
just super quickly to add on to that as well, I think '09 on the pitch achieved a couple of milestones this season that he needed to tick off. Starting in a league victory at St James's is humongous for your legacy at Sunderland. Getting man of the match in a Premier League game, having started it a few times, that's big. Keeping clean, like everything off the pitch, captained us in the Premier League, exactly. Like everything off the pitch, he'd surpassed years ago, really. But this season, he's just put those finishing touches, got the last little ticks in the boxes that he's needed, and I think he's there now.
I think that's a fair point, Johnny. But with '09, I feel as if I need to. I don't know who the hell I think I am to remind people. But some people go on like he's a competition winner and he's at the club because he brings the cones in or he tidies the changing room up afterwards. He's a quality player who's part of the group on merit.
Yeah. Well, actually, just sticking with you on this next one, Andrew, because John Harrison says, why are we so slow in releasing the kits? Surely missing the big window for creating revenue. He also says, P.S., can you ask Kelvin to tell us what he really thinks about Billy Whitehurst? And people are going to have to go back and listen to that pod to find that out. But Andrew, I've always thought about this, that we seem like, and I'm not sure it's just Sunderland, I think it's all clubs that, you've got Father's Day, which hits in after the season's finished. Everyone's off on holiday, start of the school holidays. Everyone would be buying the new kits for these things. It's an obvious thing. I don't know why they miss out on these things to sell kits.
No, I'm like you, Chris, and I thought that this was something we were gonna get. I think when Hummel were brought in, they acknowledged that fans in general like kits to come out early. You're going away on holiday, you might want to wear the colours. You might fancy a new shirt for when you're on the beach or poolside or whatever. I did think we'd start to see kits coming out a little bit sooner than we have. I'm assuming this time around it's something to do with sponsorships. I wonder if we're trying to get a new front of shirt sponsor over the line, and that's just keeping things back a bit. I was speaking to somebody who was telling me that there's already discussions in place for the designs for 27, 28. So things are done in advance. Things are. It's not like somebody now is on his to-do list when he rolls into work at Hummel HQ on Monday. He's not going to have design a shirt for Sunderland. The kits are probably somewhere in a warehouse, ready to go. Perhaps they just need to stick the sponsors on. That's the only thing this season that I can imagine has put a spanner in the works.
Yeah, and there'll still never be a better Sunderland strip than the one on DHgate with the Roker Report. logo on it. And Andrew, just sticking with this, the last one, because I'm going to come back to you, Johnny, with a corker in a second. But Lad of Light got in touch and he says, with Sunderland now standing in the spotlight at the European stage, is it time the club updated the banners of the supporters branches in the north and northwest stand? Said they could either add to the existing banners of the likes of the Italian and German Black Cat branches, or they could revamp the whole set with some additions. He said because some branches got new banners, logos, and all of that. He also says potentially we could give some recognition to the Mexican contingent who followed us last season. So I'm not sure if you had any thoughts on that.
Why not? I remember when we first put those in, and since then the club have done loads to try and just make the stadium feel like home and recognise the different fans. I'm full of admiration for exiles who support the club from afar or are able to travel on supporters buses or whatever. So yeah, if we can recognise that and make more space for them, and one or two might have new logos, get them on, get that stadium looking as brilliant as possible so that when those players walk out on the pitch, they look around and they say, this is it. This is a club where local, whether you're from a million miles away, doesn't matter. They're going to back us to the hilt.
Yeah.
So I get it. If we can, get it done.
Well said, mate. Johnny, brilliant question coming in from Charlie. He said, imagine you were given a red and white time machine and you could go back and have a chat with yourself in the deep, dark depths of the League One days. He said you can show yourself, or League One self, one clip from the last 12 months. What on the pitch moment from last year would you be showing them? And it says, what clip or moment from the last 12 months would shock your past self the most to see how far we've come?
Is it too easy to just say Granite's speech after the Chelsea game on the pitch?
Yeah.
Like that obviously we'd sailed the European qualification, so it's the crowning moment. But just to see, bloody hell, who's that? Is that Granite Xhaka, our captain? What? What are you talking about? And then that bit at the end where he's like, this is just the beginning and we'll want more. Oh my God, I'm giving myself goosebumps just talking about it. That would have fried the brain of League One Johnny Hawley so badly that it would cause a time paradox because I would have just died on the spot and then I'd never be able to go back and show myself. So, who knows what's going to happen there. But yeah, that would be... Obviously, there's moments right through the season, isn't there? Mags wins and, Stamford Bridge and this and that and fantastic stuff. West Ham even the opening day, but yeah, that speech from Granite on the pitch after the game, just to see like not just how good the team was, but how fundamentally that club had turned itself around and was firmly on the up. You can't beat that.
Yeah, Johnny getting into as big a mess as Marvel there with these timelines going all over the time.
I'm no Doctor Strange.
Well, it's a matter of opinion. Andrew, last one, linked to that. It's very similar, but Mike Sue, he says, hello lads, fantastic interview with Ross Johnson. But he says, talk of the favourite photographs got me wondering what is the most indelible image from this unforgettable season, whether it's a photograph or something circulated in the media or a moment imprinted in your mind's eye. He says, for me, it's the picture of Nordy McKaylee and the mascot singing at the top of their lungs with their eyes closed. It captured the passion and togetherness of this club perfectly. But what about you?
Hell of a question, that.
This is a good one.
And I know you need to be somewhere, Chris, so I'll make this quick.
It'll take half an hour.
That is me being quick. The players celebrating Walter Marder's goal in the derby. Everybody, just the fans, the players, just all together, loving it, loving being part of it. Yeah, that was a good moment.
Okay. Johnny, very quickly, you got a picture, an image? I mean, you said about Xhaka's speech, but one photograph that sums it up.
One photograph, the team photo after the home derby.
Oh, yes.
That was a great moment. It's an excellent couple of questions to finish off with, by the way. Top-notch stuff.
Absolutely. I just wish I'd kept more time if I'm completely honest. That's good.
Prash, brah, listen, don't let the listeners peek behind the curtain. Pretend this was all planned all along.
Yeah. Well, he's me blaming me. It was you two who've been gassing on about also. I suppose it was me with the Footy Manager games at the beginning. But
You
anyway,
asked for in-depth answers, Chris. So
yes, absolutely. All my fault. But yeah, and actually, if you want to go back and listen to that interview with Ross Johnson about taking those pictures and the story behind that picture, actually, that Johnny has just described it after beating the Mags, it was absolutely fantastic, that story and that pod and talking to him. So go back and give that a listen. But we have hinted that it is time to wrap this up. And again, just wanted to say thank you again to Andrew and Johnny. Absolutely fantastic questions and good company as always. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Much appreciated. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Don't forget, we'll have loads more on the Roker Report website. We'll have everything covered that's going on at Sunderland. Hopefully, things will start really heating up in terms of who's coming in. And as we said in this pod, potentially some departures. But we've got loads coming up on How We're the Podcast every single day, of course. But we've had part one of this Q&A. If you haven't listened into that, me and Andrew had that brilliant catch up with the restoration man, George Clark, which I think we mentioned in part one of this. We had Andrew and Johnny fighting it out in a brilliant 2-part Room 101 recently. And that's all of the pods that I can just remember off the top of my head. So check it out for all of those. But from us, it's bye for now.